Welcome back to another episode. It's been a little while since I've posted anything, just I've been busy with real life and hard to get by with everything else. But what I wanted to touch base upon today is a little bit of a different subject. I've touched base upon a lot of dynamo and a lot of mechanical things, a lot of structural things, but I wanted to touch upon a subject that's a little bit difficult for a lot of architects out there. The major problem falls that in order for us to design things properly, we often have to rely with multiple softwares. However, I always like to stay within one software, and that's the biggest issue that I have here. It's, I have a nice design, I need to place some furniture, and now the only options that I get is I can go in bin object, I can go into paying objects, and most of the content there is for commercial applications. So obviously this is an issue because I don't want to be creating these nice little furnitures that are made for lobbies and things like that. So on that end, I'm always stuck kind of dwelling either to go into 3D Studio Max or to go into Twinmotion. But then again, having to deal with finding custom components, finding custom objects, and something that fits really well into the decor. Once again, it's very hard to find good furniture of that kind, especially couches, sofas, and whatsoever. So my workaround today will be for us to create something in Revit, and we're going to try to create something that's very simple in nature, but we're going to use some nice techniques and some workarounds to get this actually done. So on that end, often I would find blocks. So whenever I used to design, I would be able to go and I would be able to find these nice little looking blocks of all types, and you're able to download these most of the times for free. And you can get some nice living rooms and some nice living room sets, and this would be amazing to just kind of drag and drop and implement into the project. However, if I want to find a quality component like this one, it's almost going to be impossible for me. So I am going to use this type of template where I've downloaded one of these blocks, and this block specifically is this one. It's nothing too complex. It has some nice little shapes. I really do like it. I took out the carpet. We can create the carpet later if we want. But what I want to do is I want to create this type of object within my environment. So that being said, we're going to create this block specifically, or more this family specifically for Revit, using this block as a 2D template. And from that 2D template, we're going to build a 3D object. And we're going to try to find this using some regular dimensions that we can find across the web. So that being said, we can see some dimensions here. We're going to try to use these dimensions as a template, and we're going to try to build out specifically this. So let's get into it and let's try to make things from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a generic component, metric, maybe even furniture, and there we go. I often don't make furniture, but I can make furnitures. So on that end, we have this template. So what I want to do is I've saved this block specifically. I kind of just nailed down what I want to know specifically as well is I want to see some of the dimensions if I'm able to create, just to see the distances when I do import things. I can kind of see that this is 202 millimeters. That makes entirely sense. 700. And once again, we can kind of see these dimensions are working more or less. So 675, so this is in a millimeter, all the same. So often when I import this within Revit, it's going to have some difficulties recognizing, what specifically this is. So let me just go on and let me just import this document. Specifically, this document is going to be found, I believe, in my old drive. My apologies, I have a lot of objects. So not always very practical. Where could I be able to find this? I don't think I'm in the correct one. So most likely here, my document, 3D objects. Would I have it here? I don't have it here. So most likely I was in the correct place. I need to be able to find it. Personal design, Revit families, and I do have one that's called 3D Furniture 3D blocks. In it, I saved a bunch of sofas. So the one that I'm using today is this specifically, the L-round couch. I really like it, so obviously I'll just ensure that I'm using the correct components, and you can kind of see it's been preloaded within my project, and I'll just kind of rotate this on so I can create the correct object and I can kind of correct it in the correct place. So once again, once I create it, I just want to measure this to ensure that we have the same measurements. We have the same measurements, so from that end, I might be able to fully expose this, and now we can get these nice little lines and whatsoever. So before I continue, I'm just going to take all this and I'm going to group it together, and I'm going to call this 2D block. I want to save this down the line just because I want to be able to get this as a reference so that it's able to stick together. And we can kind of see I have everything now created for most part. So now what I want to do is I'm going to be creating that outline with my couch outline. So I have the picture here. Hopefully I'm going to be able to, let me just open this in a new tab so I'm able to visualize it better. Luckily for me, I have enough resolution. So that being said, let me just make this a little bit more workable, and there we go. So I get these dimensions, so now I'm going to be able to build this out. And whenever I build this out, I'm going to try to build this as best as possible. I'm not going to have these nice little textures, but we're going to try our best to create something that looks okay. Not something perfect, but something that looks okay. And we're going to try to be a little bit creative so we can create all of this in a special way. So that being said, obviously we're going to start with some extrusions. But the easiest thing that I could do is just to create a bunch of boxes and things like that. But I'm going to try to make this fancy. In that sense, I want to create these individual components, and I want to create a sense of texture. I want to create those nice little rounded edges so we can have all of this all together. So to do this, I'm actually going to create a sweep instead of an extrusion. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I can just select my paths and I can create my sweeps. So once again, I'm creating these all together so I can have this type of scenario. And obviously once I'm finalized with my path, I'm going to edit my profile and we can kind of see where this is heading. In this case, I want to replicate a little bit. I have 46 centimeters here. I have 13 centimeters there. So I'm just going to reduce this and I'm going to try to create this as best as possible. I am starting on the front level. You can kind of see this is where my line is, so that implies that I need to start off, and I'll just start off as a reference, and I'm going to write 13 centimeter. I'm just creating some outlines, something that I can use as a reference. If you ever want to reorient this, you can always orient to a plane. In this case, I want to reorient to the plane that I'm working with, and that way this is going to be a lot more visible. So once again, you're just playing around, and we're going to try to capture this. In order for us to get this measurement, we're using 46 centimeters minus 13 centimeters. So it's going to be the difference between both. And once again, we just have to go inside just enough so that we can capture that full intent. In this case, I'm going to use 100 millimeters, and I'm going to create a nice little box like this. So now I can almost delete this part. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to round my edges as much as possible. In this case, I'm going to do 50 millimeter here. And I might do a little bit less here. I'm going to do 25. So we have some round edges more on the top, less at the bottom. And we can kind of see where this is coming. So once again, fairly simple in this way. But once I create this component, we can kind of see I've created my first set of component. So now this is obviously very great, but what I need to do is I need to finalize the middle part. So for that middle part, I'm going to set my work plane to be specifically this plane, and I'm going to make an extrusion, and I'm going to select this path. And once again, we can kind of see where this is coming. And I'm just going to align this perfectly to here. So now, while you don't see perfectly well, you can kind of see we've created this nice little object rounded. If I created a nice, if I created an extrusion from the start, it would have been not the best thing ever, because I would have been creating I would have been creating a square object almost, very 90 degrees like, not nicely rounded edges and things like that. Instead, I'm using a manipulation of sweeps and extrusions. So all I have to do now is I'm going to just put it in my top view, and I'm going to copy this many times. I'm going to copy once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 7 parts. The idea is I'm going to be taking each part and I'm just going to be editing the sweep. What I like about this is I have the profile. So the profile is obviously there, so I don't need to recreate that part. And I'm just kind of creating what I can. Obviously this does carry some consequences. I just have to ensure that I'm using potentially wireframe. And we can kind of see there is certain complexity associated here. I'm not too sure why. Am I not being able to see this properly? Alright, so I'm using the wrong edges. Sometimes you just got to change views in order to get it right. And once again, I don't want to delete the other view before I create this one, and not the other view but the other path. It's just because I want to translate this path to here. Sometimes this might not work specifically the way that I've designed it in the past. So when I click OK, you can kind of see that it's actually going to work in this case. But other times it's not going to be able to do it. So once again, we can kind of see I've created that second part. I'm just editing the extrusion, selecting this path, deleting the other one. So we can see that the profile is fairly complete, fairly quick. So once again, we're getting a nice rounded object. It's starting to look like a real couch. So obviously, like I said, there is a little bit of complexity, so we gotta make sure that it works. But we go one at a time, and we're gonna just edit the sketch. We're gonna modify this part. Should be a little bit easier because I can just select it like this. You can kind of see. Once again, when I go into my 3D view, in this case, you can see that this is not gonna work. It has the opposite view. So all I need to do is I need to select this. I need to mirror my component, and we can kind of see I'm just bringing it on the correct side. And once again, once I make this, it's a lot easier. So I'm trying to do this very effectively, and what I'm doing is I'm bypassing all the limitation. I'm going to be able to get a nice object in within my model, and it's not going to be some poor component and something that looks so ridiculous. I like the commercial project objects and the commercial furniture, but it just doesn't fit well within a residential environment. And it's very unfortunate. I don't want to be jumping back and forth between softwares. I want to use one software, at least until I get my idea complete. I want to evaluate my ideas and not necessarily have to jump through these hoops. That being said, I'm going to do it within Revit. There is a way. So once you know how to do it and you can kind of see it works okay, sometimes it's going to work okay. Other times you're going to have to flip it around. But it's not rocket science. It's fairly available to us, so we can actually create this relatively quick. I could create 10 of these couches, 10 of these living room sets within maybe 2 hours, 3 hours of time. So obviously once I create it, I can reuse these components, and it's going to be a lot easier for me to do all this all together. I wish there was a way for me to speed this up, but I'm going to do it the hard way just because I want to demonstrate how fast we can do it. It shouldn't be too difficult for people to recreate it. And at one point, I'm going to be uploading these objects on my website. It's just for now. I don't necessarily have all the time in the world. And we can kind of see I messed it up slightly. I just need to modify this. I clicked too fast. And I'm doing this the long way just so I can kind of demonstrate to everybody how to do this properly. So once again, nothing too difficult here. We're just modifying some components. There are going to be some additional things that we're going to need to change. But as we can see, we're already starting to build this couch and it's starting to look real good. So once again, we just want to go through this notion. 1, 2, 3, 4, trim, 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 trim. And it's very unfortunate that this is so difficult sometimes within the Revit environment. You know, we would love for this to be a little bit more simpler, for us to have more availability with the families that we use, especially for the residential applications. I get it for the commercial side, there's plenty of objects, there's plenty to choose from, but the residential furniture doesn't get necessarily modeled within Revit. There's just no case use, and you know, obviously everything's almost to some extent custom or very relative to the market you're in. So in that sense, these objects are not available for us to kind of build from. So we'll fix that just by creating our own ones as best as possible, and obviously we want to create something that looks good so that it can, you know, fit well within that environment, and we can kind of see it's starting to look like something that we want to use. So once again, we can do this with so many of them. There's so many availability of these objects online. You just have to type in what we said specifically, AutoCAD living room block, and you can kind of see you get these free blocks all over the place. They're really nice looking. They provide everything what we need, and basically you just have to kind of build from there. Once again, the last object is this one, the last part, I mean. So once again, we have everything. I might have to modify this one as well, just because it's actually sitting on the correct side. How about this? Everything's pretty straightforward. We only had one issue, so it wasn't too bad. So once again, just creating these objects, and we can kind of see we've created the first part of this family. So we're gonna do the same thing for the backrest, I guess, and for the legs, and for the back leg support. We're also gonna do the same thing for this nice little console table, whatever we want to call it, side table. And we're also gonna do the same for this coffee table. We're gonna try to create something that looks good. We're gonna assign some materials to it, and from there we're gonna have a nice looking object. So in this case, we have this giant piece of, you know, backrest. Obviously, because I'm consider this to be a modular component, I'm going to try to build it in that way as well. So that being said, I'm just going to use this as my family, and I'm going to use once again that sweep blend aspect. However, I'm going to set my plane for it to be this. So while it's not perfect, we're going to get more or less where we want to get. So once again, I can kind of see that I have these furnitures, I have these components. Am I using the correct one? Oh, I'm not even using the correct one. So once again, just using these components as a basis. I think I missed something. And potentially I'm gonna just fix this by doing something else. So sometimes to get this right, I just want to isolate this component. It's gonna provide me with a little bit of clarity. I should have done that from the get-go. I messed up, so my apologies on that. And once again, just trying to go through the notion of this. I'm creating individual components. I'm considering this to be a modular system. So once again, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. So that being said, we have some limitations, and I believe that I messed this up again just because I've used the wrong work plane. Potentially I'm going to be able to modify sweep. Did I set this in the correct work plane? Sure I did. Just consider it this way. And once again, I'm going to reorient to a plane. And I'm going to use not my extrusion, but my work plane. Whatever my profile is. Edit profile. So once I edit my profile, okay, I can kind of see that I'm using, there we go. That makes a little bit more sense. Alright, profile view. Perfectly good. So now we can do the rest of the things. So obviously I have 72 centimeters, and I'll do 72 centimeters. This is my top side of my backrest. Ideally, I want to just bring this up, and maybe I'm going to bring this 50 millimeters from here. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this idea as well. So once again, we want to create this type of component, and I'm just gonna turn around to see exactly where I am. So this signifies the edge of my, outer side. So I'm gonna be building my shape on the inside here, just so I can know. And once I'm here, now I can build this correctly. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I'm just building out another component. I'm going to use a little bit less than last time. I'm going to use maybe 50. And from my 50, I'm going to just bring it down. I'm going to take away all these temporary lines. And once again, I'm just going to fillet my components. I'm going to apply here maybe 25 on my each side. Maybe even less, 15. So once again, you want to use something that's going to work for you for your project, but obviously I made a mistake here. I only need the inner side to be this. Yes, exactly. So once again, 15. And you can kind of see this is starting to look like something that I want to use. Potentially just to avoid, because this is a smaller piece, I might not even have 4 inches of space. I'm going to reduce this to 30 potentially. We can kind of see what's the purpose of it. It's when I build out, so I don't have to build out the overall aspect. We can kind of see it's starting to look like something. It looks exactly like that shape, that component. What I'm going to be building in addition is going to be building some legs to support this backrest. So on that end, we're going to do the same thing what we've done before. I'm going to create an extrusion, and my extrusion is going to be based on this face. So once again, we can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm just going upwards, and I'm going to lock it to this. So once again, we can kind of see that it's starting to become somewhat of an okay. Maybe I don't like this shape a little bit. So what I'll do is I'm going to edit this sweep. I'm going to edit this profile, and I'll change this to maybe 25. Feels like it's not enough. Do want a little bit more. I think this is starting to look a little bit better. Like I said, I want modern furniture look type of deal. And we're going to be able to apply a bunch of materials to this. And let me just copy paste this. And once again, we can kind of see the deal where I'm copying pasting this across the board. I don't have anything here in this end. So very simple on this end. I'm just editing these sweeps. And like I said, nothing too difficult here. Change it. We can see that this is sitting on the inside side. Perfect. Remove constraint. Edit extrusion. And delete the old paths, the old profile. So this is quite repetitive at one point, but rest assured we're going to be able to complete this together, and hopefully we're going to do this in record time. I don't want to spend necessarily all night doing this neither. So once again, just trying to create these as much as possible. If I ever see an error that it flips the wrong way around like it did that one time, I'm just going to return backwards and I'm going to fix that problem. So once again, just doing this step, and potentially I should have done this with another object just because I've done this family before. So I guess I'm cheating a little bit, but rest assured I've applied this concept multiple times. It's just I like this sofa specifically. So I wanted to model to impress. So we can see this is not too difficult at all. And like I said, use this to your advantage. You're going to be able to build nice furniture, good looking furniture relatively quick. It's going to provide you the value that you don't necessarily have within your project. And you're going to be able to at least get some nice, good looking layouts, perspectives of your rooms based on objects within your Revit environment. So you don't have to always constantly export, use other softwares. And even though that's okay, I use Twinmotion, I use Unreal Engine, I use 3D Studio Max. You know, sometimes I just want to stick in Revit. I don't want to necessarily have to export and do all that process and upload and resync and things like that. I just want to stay within one environment. I don't know how this is so difficult to understand for Revit, for Autodesk. Just make some furniture, you know. A lot of us are using this to design homes. Might as well have some advantages. And remove constraint. I'm being a little bit lazy. I'm trying to do this a little bit quicker. Avoiding this altogether. Sticking in one plane altogether. Up, up. So obviously the next part is going to be a little bit trickier. We need to figure out some leg placement. I mean, it's not tricky. For most part, it's going to be okay. And we were lucky. In this case, there was nothing really to modify, which is good. Sometimes I get the, you know, just my profile of my sweep gets flipped around. So now we're looking at this component and we can kind of see it's starting to look like something good. In addition, I can create a camera view. I want to just create something real quick so I can visualize this component. I'm going to use my full navigation wheel. I want to bring it just down a little bit. I want to be able to visualize this as much as possible. Let me just go into a realistic walk. Sadly, I'm not able to add any. I don't think I'm even going to be able to add some. I can add some shadows. It would have been real nice to add some shadows. Can't add shadows, but we can kind of see that it's starting to look like something. So obviously the last part is going to be a little bit of a annoyance, but we have to create the legs. So what I want to do is I'm going to set my work plane to my reference level, and I'm going really fast at this because, you know, no time to waste in this world. So on that end, I'm just creating some basic leg placement. I'll try to create them evenly. So what I'll do is I'm going to create them maybe 6 inches from the sides. 6 inches is potentially too much. I'll do maybe 4 inches. I want this to be a little bit more than my offset. So what I'm doing is I'm just using this as placement. I'm going to create my legs that they're going to be 2 inches. And like I said, I can use this as a reference, but basically I'm just going to create one. And I know that it's 13 centimeters in this case, but I can always align it. Once again, I'm just creating one. And I'm just kind of copy pasting this across the board. We can kind of see that I'm creating it more or less. It would have been real nice to create something a little bit more practical, model lines potentially. And I'll do again 4 inches. So what I want to do instead is potentially move this. Made a mistake. Move SC for center. So I want to move specifically here. And I'm going to move one across maybe here and another one. It can be systematic, you know, it's more or less what it needs to be. So once again, I'm just gonna use this as a reference. Why can't I select this line? Does it allow me to create lines? Too bad, I'm gonna create my own ones again. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I'm just creating some outlines. I'm gonna delete those after. There we go. Perfect. So I have one extra line. So what I want to do is I'm going to just copy this component. Use my center point as a reference. And once again, just create it approximately to where it needs to be. It's not rocket science. We don't need to recreate the wheel here. I want to create something that looks okay, just so it doesn't look weird. Something realistic as well. Would be very nice to have something realistic. So once again, 1, 2. Can I make this, sure, 3, 4, 5, 6. And like I said, don't waste too much time here. It's not a real object. It's a theoretical object, obviously. But we're trying to create whatever we can, just so that it looks good. And here, obviously, we'll need to create multiple. And there we are. So what I can do now is potentially I can just take these model lines. I'm going to just delete them. They're going to appear in my views, obviously. So once again, we're starting to see something that looks real. We can see the legs. We're going to be able to apply some materials to them. And obviously what I want to do is I want to be able to select the other ones that can correspond to my top view. Not my top view, but all my headrests. And while I have all these, I'm just going to copy them into the same place. I'm going to change the work plane for these, and I'm just going to flip them up. And we can kind of see I only have one that I need to modify just because this one doesn't have sufficient rest. So that being said, is there a way that I can flip this around? Potentially I can. I want to make this nice. And I'm going to use my center line as location, and there we go. We're going to bring it here. Potentially I didn't copy it. Just when you forget things. And I should have done this right away, but obviously I'm going to need to adjust this. So these are all going to be 50 millimeters. And why not be precise? And like I said, this is one of the last one that I need to do. I want to copy this. So my placement is going to be this. I'm going to rotate it from around here to here. So now all my headrests also have some support. So now we can see it's starting to look like a real object. If I look from my 3D view, we can see that it's not a bad component. Just we need to apply some materials. So in this end, what I'll do is, while I'm at it, I'm going to create a material, and I'm going to call this legs material. And I'm going to make this type material, and I'm going to say OK. I'm also going to enjoy making these. I'm going to call these backrest legs material. I'll make this also a material. I could control these individually just for the sake of argument. I'm going to make this one material. I mean, we could play around with this, apply each one individually so we can have multiple of them. And that's what I usually do. But in this case, I'm just going to simplify this, and I'm going to call this backrest material. My apologies if I'm making some spelling mistakes. And these are the cushions. Not even sure how to call this part. I'm gonna call this cushions material. Whatever. So I have multiple materials, and this is already complete. So we have some parts complete, but now we have this nice little table that I want to complete. And we have also the other table. So in this case, we can create this. Personally, I'm not a big fan of how this looks in this case. So I'm gonna maybe modify it slightly so it looks a little bit better. So what I'll do is I'm just going to create an extrusion, and potentially I won't create an extrusion. What I'll do is I'll use the same technique. I'll create a sweep blend, and the sweep blend will be around this component. So this is my outer table. So once again, we can kind of see we've created the sweep blend, but there is a problem. I don't want a sweep blend. I actually wanted a blend, just a sweep. Made a mistake there. So once this is created, we can kind of see we're continuing with the same process. The only thing that I need to do additionally, I'm going to do coffee table dimensions. I want to get some sense of what it looks like. 18, 16, there we go, 16 inches. We got a winner. I can kind of see that this is my interior side, so I'll just align this towards my plane. Nope, this is not edit profile. Now I'm gonna go to orient to plane. It's gonna create this profile plane. So once again, I have 13 inches. Doesn't matter what measurements you're using. Down the line, everything's gonna be good enough. In this case, I'm creating a 2-inch slab. 2-inch. I'll do metric 50 millimeter. This is not 50 millimeter. It's a little bit more than 50 millimeter. So once again, it's just about creating that nice little profile. I am missing one. There we go. We're using the objects. And like I said, we're gonna just chamfer these. Not chamfer, but fillet. Chamfer is the other one. So fillet this in some way. We have maybe not 25. I'm gonna, you know what? I might as well chamfer this. Let's be creative a little bit. We're gonna make these look real nice. There we go. It's gonna look a little bit more edgy. So once again, nothing that I don't have, but we can kind of see. I could make this bigger, less. In this case, I'll try to be a little bit creative. I want this to be slightly exposed, and what I'll do at the bottom is I'm gonna make this just so slightly. I'm gonna add 5. I want my rounded edges. Everybody loves rounded edges. Flat edges, those 90 degrees, they're not very practical. You touch them slightly, they're gonna, they're not gonna look so good. So once again, I'm just using the same technique to create the same thing, and I'm gonna set my plane to be this one specifically. I'm using this. There we go. I'll build it out. Once again, nothing's too difficult here. We've created a somewhat of a nice looking table. We don't have the legs part yet, but we could create something nice. In this case, I'm just gonna create something, a simple extrusion. I won't use necessarily this edge. I find that this edge is a little bit too much on the outside. Could I utilize this? So in this case, I want to create a nice little 5 millimeter edge, maybe 10, half an inch, almost half an inch. So there we go. I think this is gonna serve me well. So once again, it won't be sufficient for what I'm trying to create. I'll just need to adjust it, and there we go. So now I have a coffee table, I have a coffee top. So usually what I do here is I'm going to call this coffee table top material and call it OK. This is my coffee table support material. Be systematic, and like I said, sometimes you want to go across the board. And I'm just gonna copy paste this, or maybe not copy paste this. Basically, I'm just moving this across here, and basically I'm doing the same thing here. I'm gonna use this as a reference instead. What I'll do here instead is I might just move this just so slightly. I'm gonna move this by maybe 2 millimeters, maybe even a little bit more. And how about we put 95, 92. It's going the opposite way. So 85, a little bit more. Just want to offset it off the couch. I don't want it to be glued to the couch. That doesn't make any sense. And we can kind of see it's starting to look weird. It is what it is. So potentially what I'll do here is I'm going to delete this object. There we go. Delete this. Pick this. I'm going to pick 5 millimeter. And I'm going to choose this, but I'm going to flip it on this side. So that way we're not 100% glued to the table. It's a console table. It's not component that's glued specific to it, and we can kind of see that it's flipping the other way around, which is very unrealistic. Edit sweep. Where is my family? So all I need to do is I need to flip this around. Kind of like what I've done before. I'm going to use this as an edge. Sometimes you get that issue. It is what it is. And once again, just modify this profile. And we can kind of see it's not sitting correctly in the right place. So what I'll do is I'm going to use my sizing. So what I had here was 72 centimeters. Can I maybe pick a plane? So if I move this here, it's going to move it way out of perspective. If I use this plane, it's going to almost move it out of perspective. And basically, I'll just align this by moving it downwards. I want to align it perfectly with my plane. Too bad this is not working exactly the way it's supposed to, just because I didn't select this, I believe. But here we go, we got that console table. We also have this as a different material. So what I call this is console table material. I'm going to click OK, and this is also going to be my console table material. And lastly, we have, some support to build here. The support that I like to build here is potentially I'm going to do something fancy. In this case, it doesn't necessarily have to be fancy. What I'll do is I'm going to just simplify this. I'm going to make 4 legs or 5, 6 legs. So what I'll do is I'm just going to copy this. Once again, we want to be able to create, a model line. I'm going to place this maybe 2 inches on the inside, and we can kind of see that it's either way, it's sitting on the flat side on the inside. So we have somewhat, and I wish I would be able to use something different, maybe invisible line. Alright, invisible line works well. I'll use these legs, and I'll just place one here, one there. I want to just be able to see the size, not the size, but the height. I'll adjust them properly. And while this is not ideal, we're just gonna use this for now. Later on, if we have to modify it, it is what it is. We'll modify it. I'm gonna make a bunch of copies of this. There we go, middle. And once again, place. And we're going to drive it to the edge. I like imperfections. So we can kind of see it's starting to look like something. So now we have our console tables, we have our legs. The only thing I'm missing is this material. But basically this is not the leg material. I'm going to call this console table leg material. And once again, we have that entirety of the object modeled. So this was a quick fix for a problem that I had in the past. Once again, we can kind of see this is starting to look like something. It looks a lot better than anything out there. We're building something just so that we can have a reference, a good idea how our space is going to look like. Let's just call this whatever. I'm going to call this example couch 3D. And I'm going to load this into my project. So once I load it into my project, you can kind of see that it's starting to look really well. And I'll want to place it potentially in this way. So now when I'm looking at my view, you can see a nice little good looking table. However, what I don't have here is my materials. And that's going to be the last side of it. So basically custom material, I'm just going to use a letter. I do have a letter somewhere. White letter, there we go. I'm going to use white letter. I'm going to also use this as my backrest material. And basically my console coffee table, I'm going to make it the same. Maybe I'll use something black. just to, there we go, I like really this. Simple things, don't overcomplicate it for now. Leg material, no, console table material. I should have called this top. And we have the leg material. I'm just going to use a basic black color. Console table. And lastly, for this wood, it would have been real nice to use a ribbed material. Let me try to create one. And that's definitely not what I want to call this. I'm going to just rename this as sample. I'm going to try to use a nice little wood material. And let's see if we can. Wood paint. Nope. Wood. So we have a dark color, so we want something to offset that. It would have been really nice to have some ribbed material, you know, something simple, but I don't think we're gonna have anything. So siding potentially could work within siding. If only I was able to place this, it would have been even better. Maybe miscellaneous components. Yeah, there we go. We're gonna go crazy. These are all black materials. I need something to contrast my black. Linear, silver gray looks almost okay. And you know what? We're gonna use this corky material, whatever this is. I'm not even sure what this means. But yeah, let's go crazy at it. Invalid. So backrest leg material. Well, that's just great. Something happened. Of course, this would happen. So in this case, the console table, no, the coffee table support material is supposed to be the sample one. This is gonna, legs material, it's gonna be alicorn gray. 1, 2, 3. This is supposed to be the white letter. 1, 2. And lastly, the tabletop, we talked about this large black tiles. And console table material. So we have everything. Hopefully this is not going to cause me any issues. But once again, we can kind of see that it's... Oh, I really did injustice with this thing. Let me just change this while I can. Before I get made fun of. And you know what? We're going to apply some letter. Why not? You've never seen a table like this. I've never seen a table like this. So why not? So once again, we have something that's usable. We can kind of see this is working. So obviously I would be able to apply a little bit more material and I would be able to go within here and potentially cloud render this. I don't have any sun settings for some reason, or maybe I'm not. Shadows. Supposed to be shadows. Sun interior. Sure. This is not what I'm looking for. So sun settings, I'm just gonna apply still morning March. And there we go. So this is okay. For the most part, we're just gonna go and we're gonna try to cloud render this. Just so I can get a good idea of how this works. Bunch of things missing, it's okay. And hopefully we're going to be able to see what this looks like. In the meanwhile, maybe I can try rendering this in my window just as a quick basis. I don't like to use this because it's going to go insanely crazy on my screen. Interior sun only morning March, no clouds. We'll adjust the exposure, but potentially we could use this as well. So I'm going to try just to render this as much as possible. And we can kind of see it's starting to look like something. It's not the end of the world, and this is what I don't like. It's just my CPU is not configured properly. I want to be able to see my settings, and let's just try it high. At the same time, I'm just going to test it out to make sure that this is functioning correctly. Sometimes my temperatures are way off the charts, so I want to be able to complete something without necessarily burning my computer. In this case, it's starting to look like something. I am recording the screen at the same time, so hopefully it's not gonna do too much damage, but we can kind of see we're starting to add some elements of realism. It's not bad. It's a good piece of furniture. We can create something nice, decent looking without necessarily overburdening our workflow. We can have all this at a very relatively small cost, and obviously it's free. You get to find the blocks, you get to build them on top of it, and from there on you're able to build something that's going to look like something a little bit more realistic than everything else what you can find online. Just online, the families for residential applications are so sad in some way, just because there's nothing out there, and the fancy objects, nobody's gonna pay $60 for a bunch of families. Let's be frank, like, it's just not worth it. This is temporarily. Once I've created a nice design, I can adjust my room sizes and my places. Then I'll go into third-party softwares like 3D Studio Max or Twinmotion, or not Twinmotion, but whatever, Unreal Engine and Unity, and build from there a little bit better. Just for me, I'm okay with this type of solution, and this provides me with this type of thing. So once again, we're going to be able to create some nice little outputs, and we can see just by using a little bit of creativity, it goes a long way, and this is great to get started. So obviously when we can, and I've demonstrated this, sorry, wrong one, there's so many of them. So once again, we can kind of see there's a lot of families out there, free CADs. Just type in AutoCAD living room blocks. You can do it for dining rooms, you can do it for bedrooms, and all of them will function in the same way. You're gonna use a little bit of that sweep technique blended with that extrusion, and you're gonna be able to create these nice looking objects relatively quick. And hopefully this is gonna help your workflow a little bit. Like I said, there is benefits in using this just because you can get the good results relatively quick. And let's just finalize this and I'll stop this recording. But basically that's going to be it for this session. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this, use it to your advantage. If you can share a little bit of what you've done on your side, just to see a little bit, so I can get inspired as well. There we go. Just modifying things a little bit. Color seems to be okay for most part. So something like this would be very nice. You see, you can kind of get a good feel of the room. You can get a good feel of what type of furniture could fit into the space, and everything's there. So once again, we get that advantage. So subscribe and stay tuned for more videos. I'll try to blend in a little bit of dynamo. I'll try to blend in a little bit of architecture. I'll try to blend in a little bit of mechanical. I'll try to blend in pretty much everything, and then from there on I'll go into the ISO 19650 concepts, and I'll go into the the whole BIM management side and the more technical aspects of BIM. But we'll get to there one video at a time. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next episode.